and like appreciated it for what it is. And so I really think even if it's just a couple of us, we really should push off to it because we could probably, I don't know, figure out things that most other people haven't.
Would be interested to try to think through what it'd be like now. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure in the
And
case.
there might be some interesting things to read too, because I mean, besides the Finley and the A.V. Miller copy, I've got a copy of um MJ Petrie's, and he's got like an extensive introduction that talks about the history of encyclopedias from Diderot all the way up until Hegel. That might be interesting for us to think about, like how the information was changed by, or the form was changed by Hegel when he did his project, as opposed to what Diderot did. Like today, encyclopedias are everywhere, but mostly they're online now. But like even up to not too long ago, you could buy like an extensive like A through Z encyclopedia, and it's usually just, I mean, just like that, just a bare stacking up of information alphabetically with nice little articles that give you an overview of um the area of science that they're talking about without necessarily connecting it all up. And Hegel's, of course, connected it all up logically through the dialectic. Um, and so that's interesting to think about. And like, um, well, anyway, so yeah, does that sound good to you guys? Because I want to keep going regardless, and I'm going to read it. Even if this group broke down, I would still open it up once we got done. So great, sounds like we're going to do that. So, Kyle, uh, the notion.
Yeah, trying to get a little bit of a summary, kind of, you know, compress everything back down. But the guess I can say is that we start off at the universal, which is developed from uh, the the absolute relation between being and essence. So, trying to figure. So the universal, it's yeah, I might just need to fall back to going through Miller or Harris.
Yeah, please do.
So he
Yeah,
summarizes
yeah, on 603 he says the universal is free power.
free
It is
power, right?
itself and takes its other within its embrace, but without doing violence to it. The universal is in its other in peaceful communion with itself. Very interesting.
Yeah, I forgot to tell me how a bare particular doesn't make any sense and at the end of all this, but
Yeah.
the universal is system. It is one. It is differentiated whole organized on a principle which determines and integrates its elements or moments or differences or specifications. It gives them each its determinate character in relation to and its reciprocity of with every other. This is precisely why each particular moment has universal immanent in it. Each moment being inseparable and in integral relation to every other, in its consequence, the complement of every other. So each reflects into its other, opposes itself to it, unites with it as supplement to specify the universal further, which is the determination of the particulars. The process requires more explanation.
Yeah, and it's interesting here because in this part of the book he really gets to brass tacks with his remarks instead of critiquing other systems or other supposedly other systems. He starts to talk about like the remark on 612. He says universality, particularity, and individuality, which is the syllogism, are, according to the foregoing exposition, the three determinate notions. That is, if one insists on counting them. We've already shown that number is an unsuitable form in which to hold notional determinations, but for the determinations of the notion itself, it is unsuitable in the highest degree. Number, since it has the unit for its principle, converts them as counted into completely isolated and mutually indifferent determinations, which is untrue, completely untrue. We have seen from the foregoing that the truth is that the different determinate notions, far from falling apart into number, are simply only one and the same notion. And there's something, yeah, there's something. He's determining what the whole consists of as itself, as opposed to, you know, identifying the whole as its parts in three and so on and so forth. Uh, which I find really interesting. And then he starts talking on 613 about classical uh, logic and how classical logic deals with categories and notions, um, and how it usually falls back to number or order and so forth. Which, I mean, you look at any science textbook, and that's exactly how they do it. You know, they cut everything up into silos, whereas Hegel says it's all one.
I go back to where you equate where the understanding keeps dividing up and putting everything in its isolation from each other, but never recombines or illustrates how they are all interconnected to each other, anyways.
Yeah, that's on page 600. That's how he starts the chapter. He says, understanding is the term usually employed to express the faculty of notions. As so used, it is distinguished from the faculty of judgment and the faculty of syllogisms of the formal reason. So even within discussion of reason in the past and in common sense, everything's still divided up and all cut up, which is very interesting. Whereas Hegel, of course, says you can't do that, or what you're talking about falls apart.
He actually does somewhere here actually demonstrate if you hold it in its abstract alone, it just becomes determinate in of itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. His I, I yeah, I really wish I had read more for this class today, but that's all right. Um, yeah, in the first instance, it is the pure notion or the determination of universality. Secondly, the notion is thereby posited as this particular or determinate notion distinct from others. Thirdly, individuality is the notion reflecting itself out of the difference into absolute negativity. This is at the same time the moment in which it has passed out of its identity into its otherness and becomes the judgment. Um, so so yeah, the even the procession from the universal notion through to the judgment is tripartite, and the judgment itself is where the notion takes on a more determinate form, I guess you could say. Like there's a determinate notion, but there's also judgment as determinateness. Does that make sense? Because chapter 2 it says the judgment is the determinateness of the notion posited in the notion itself. So it's the posited determinateness, whereas before it's it's just the um unposited, the implicit determinate notion
Not the
as the particular.
it is the
Does that make
form.
sense?
Yeah, it is the formal uh notion. It's just the form of it coming up. Now we got
Yeah,
the content to determinacy.
yeah,
So is it? formal, and then but now we're dealing with it relationally to other notions. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
that same pattern again. You got the formal, relational, absolute.
Yeah, on 604, just going along with the reading, he says the universal shows itself as this totality as follows. Insofar as it contains determinateness, it is not merely the first negation, but also the reflection of this negation into itself. Um, okay. God. Sorry.
That's all right. So six, I actually underlined something again, which has been pretty rare on me for this. When he's talking about determinate notions and using it as a comparison, which is an abstract universality, comparing it back to actual universality. But every determinate notion is, of course, empty insofar as it does not contain the totality, but only a one-sided determinants. Even when it has some other concrete content, for example, a man, the state, animal, etc., it still remains an empty notion since its determinateness is not the principle of its differences. A principle contains the beginning and the essential nature of its development and realization.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
And
things.
even being itself starts as a universal notion, and its form is exactly what well, its form, whether it's being or determinate being or any of the categories we come across, they all have a universal sort of an empty determination whose uh yeah, as universality is the utterly simple determination, it does not seem capable of any explanation, for an explanation must concern itself with definitions and distinctions and must apply predicates to its object, and to do this to what is simple would alter rather than explain it. So when we encounter being in the very first, it was a pure category. But as he began to explain it and attach predicates and explanations, it became unpurified. And that was the point. There's no such thing as a pure category, first of all, according to Hegel, because a pure category doesn't actually mean anything at all, doesn't actually carry anything with it until it's determined, and then it's unpurified. It it is what it actually is, as opposed to what we think it is just sort of an empty signifier. Something along those lines.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like it's a little chemical you haven't done anything with, and you go through the process of using it, and you get this precipitate left over from.
One of the things I really like about this chapter is that at first you're looking at it and you're thinking, okay, like I want to treat it like the rest of the book. And really what he's doing in this chapter, if this sounds a little crazy, is that he's um at first you're looking at it and you're hang thinking, on. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So at first you're looking at it and you're thinking, okay, this is another category. He's explaining it. But in explaining this particular category at this level of wholeness, he's actually describing what happens in the rest of the book. So you read this chapter on the notion where he takes you through universal, particular, and individual. He's really, if you mirror it in your mind back across the entire book, across every category we've come to, he's describing um, the path we've already tread with being, with determinate being, and those in and of themselves. I don't mean that he's repatterning the notion across them. I'm just saying that where we could read the transitions in the dialectic of being and determinate being as they played out, a higher level description is now available to us, and that's what he's he's sort of laying out. It's not a summary because it itself is emerging just as the rest of the book did, but it explains the rest of the book far more fully than the earlier parts of the book were capable of. Like, if that makes sense. Like I want to treat it as a summary on the notion when actually it's just doing what it's done since being, I guess you could say. The category is unfolding,
It's just
category of the category.
the process of thought being able to develop itself more and more, be able to more determine what it's doing of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's thought thinking itself. And at this level, thought is thinking itself rather uh more deeply. I guess you could say deep thoughts with Matthew here on the Hegel channel. Man, I really kind of wish I'd reread. I've read this with Alex and you, Kyle,
Right.
before, and so I thought, well, I already know it, sort of, but
It's,
opening it back up, I feel like I'm getting even deeper into it.
it's just interesting going back through this and seeing like, yeah, so universal,
Yep. And the
it develops,
particular is of course the determinate
yeah, the
notion.
yeah, that's like the universal themselves are particular. Particulars are themselves universal, and each of those are both technically themselves individuals.
Yeah.
Each moment implies that the other two moments.
Right.
Yeah. And the particular is the universal itself. This is 606, halfway down,
Yeah.
but it is its difference or relation to an other, its illusory reference outward. But there's no other present from which the particular could be distinguished except the universal itself. So when you're at the particular, the universal is sublated, to itself. It's preserved. The universal determines itself, and so is itself the particular. The determinateness is its difference. It is distinguished only from its own self. Therefore, its species are only the universal itself and the particular. The universal as the notion itself and its opposite, and this again is the universal itself as it's posited. So remember how we talked about something and its other, and the other was just the something. This
Yeah.
is kind of like the same thing, only at a higher level of a complete notion, and how that notion is structured. You look anywhere in the book and you see the same structure, right? You have the universal notion, and then you have the universal in its more determinateness, which is particular, and then you have, of course, an individual instance, which is also carries with it its universal and particular. Um, I think, right? Yeah, no. Okay, so the big thing with particular is the difference. Let me see if I can find individual. He spends an awful lot of time on this,
Yeah.
which I
No,
find
he's right
fascinating.
on the particular. Yes, it is. He gets to the point where he talks about the not just a difference, so because it's like the identity of the universal is the identity. We're going back to that again. Then
Yeah.
it differentiates itself. That's a particular, which then the universal and the particular oppose each other. And then I'm trying to remember what happens after that.
Universality, particular to individuality, which is the
Position
synthesis of the universality and particularity.
Yeah.
opposition goes
Yeah,
to
the
contradiction.
individuals on page 618 if you want to look at it.
Yeah, so it's the opposition turns into contradiction, which then resolves itself into another universal. Yeah.
To bother you.
You're fine. What do you need, hon?
Found an ancient city.
Great.
Oops. Oh yeah, that's right. He also again, I guess it makes sense because it's another description of being going, through nothing to becoming to determinate being, describing the becoming of individuality because it is the same process, is it not?
Hey, can you repeat that last? Sorry.
Oh, it's just he talks about university particularly appeared on the one hand 619.
Yeah.
Appeared on the one hand as moments of becoming of individuality.
Yeah.
Just it's becoming, it's just being and nothing, becoming.
Yes. Yes. Universality and particularity appeared on the one hand as moments of the becoming of individuality. So, it's being and nothing. And universality and particularity are oscillating, and their action generates the individual, I guess, instances of the notion, Um, but it has already been shown that they are in themselves the total notion, and consequently an individuality do not pass over into an other, but that in individuality there is only posited what they are in and for themselves. The universal is for itself because it is its own self, absolute mediation, self-reference, only as absolute negativity. It is an abstract universal insofar as this sublating is an external act and so a dropping of the determinateness. This negativity, therefore, certainly attaches to the abstract universal, but remains outside as a mere condition of it. It is the abstractive activity itself which holds its universal away and opposite it, and which therefore does not have individuality within itself and remains destitute of the notion. He's describing how he came to abstract sheer being for the beginning. That's what he's saying. He's saying this is what it looks like. If I start with sheer being, then it has a presupposition, but it has been cut off, abstracted from its presuppositions in order to be considered as just an abstract universal itself. That's what he's saying on 619. That's brilliant. Like, he actually gives you the blueprints right in the text of how he started, the his system. It's fascinating, and anyone doing a study, would be well advised to look at least this chapter, because this is how Marx did it with the commodity, I think, and to build, because at this point, if you're following Hegel, the system already exists. Hegel has already laid it out. Spirit, logic, nature, spirit, right? That contains the whole of reality, at least in a systematic form. On top of that, if you want to spin out, like Marx did, a subcategory of property or right, which, he did with capital, there are only going to be pseudo circles of sort of like sub circles that are further researched. So whenever you get into a scientific study and you want to follow Hegel and Marx in their patterning of the study and do it like this, you just have to remember that reality determines itself. And so the reality is the absolute. A subset of reality or the absolute are things like capital, which capital does not determine itself. Reality does, but reality generates social systems like capital, so on and so forth. So, God, what would be what would be a good subject to like apply this to? I mean, anything. I'm just trying to think of something that hasn't been, like, uh, like what if I wanted to apply Hegel's system to the history of German literature? Like, I could do that. I have no idea how I would start or what beginning category I would use, but I think I probably would get some clue if I read like his lectures on art and then I could sort of like zero in on something, gather the material, and then start organizing it.
Well,
I say organizing it. There would be like a, I mean, I look at Marx and he went through several drafts organizing his material, but it wasn't in a fully Hegelian vein until he revised Capital to be what it looks like now. But you would take that beginning category that contains everything and then work it up from there. Well,
my guess would be that Hegel already did that with literature. That'd
it
be my
makes me wonder
guess.
how much he did that with economics, because there's an entire economic literature that was put to the fire by Rosencrantz. Rosencrantz had everything, okay? And he trashed a great deal of it, including all the economic literature, according to Lukács. Lukács writes in his Young Hegel that Rosencrantz had a wealth of drafts and or non-published things that Hegel was working on or working from that never saw the light of day. And, you know,
Yeah, he was. Yeah, Hegel was interested in political economy. He was a close reader of Adam Smith. So
yeah, yeah. I think he did. I think he actually
probably, my,
did.
my guess would be that he probably had already came up with insights of Marx later, made known to us. Hegel probably already had those ideas first.
Or at least set them out in schematic. If not, you know, the piece that Kautsky edited, volume 4 of Capital, that's probably as close as we'll ever get to something along the lines of a commentary on Adam Smith and those other guys.
So long as you don't
Unfortunately,
count the edition that Kautsky himself
well,
edited.
yeah,
Whatever the Soviet Union put out is generally the version people use.
yes, exactly. But yeah, Doug, I was just telling them that, you know, if you well, actually no, I was telling Ben on text. He was talking about how Lukács was slightly Stalinist in talking about how Hegel is mystified. And really, I think young Hegel like starts off with the preface and it repeats that Hegel is idealist and mystified several times, but it doesn't really connect with the rest of the text. And so I think it's just him clearing his throat for the censors. And then the rest of the text is the actual discussion. Because he took Hegel's system very seriously. So yeah. Um, how you feeling, Doug?
I'm very tired. I've just had problems with the computer all day. I'm not exactly sure. I'm hoping it was just like clutter on the hard drive or something. It's
Yeah.
been fine for like the last few hours. And it doesn't help. Like I'm already frustrated because that cuts into the writing, although I think I got as much done as I wanted to. And thankfully it's done with the Hitler section. So I'm on Julia Savola, which isn't really an improvement, but it's not Hitler.
Just remember to back your shit up so you don't have to reread it.
Oh yeah, no, it was all backed up. Like as soon as I thought there were problems, I backed it up. And every time I get off the computer, I email whatever the files I'm working for to myself. So
Yeah. Awesome.
at most, I might have lost like 2 sentences, but that's okay.
I can't tell you the number of times I've had a rage fit this weekend thinking that I'm going to sit down and write just a excoriating commentary to Budgeon online talking about how he's perfectly fine publishing Lee and his crypto Stalinist attacks on Trotsky, but he won't publish your book taking down Grover Fur. Like, fuck
It's
you, dude.
Lee. There's like a little more of a market for Lee. He's more well known, and as much as I would like to be published, like badgering him isn't going to help. He's a too much of a curmudgeon.
I know. I didn't do
And
any of that, but
no,
I was
and
just
he's also
angry for
just
a
a
while.
businessman, because if he actually cared about those politics, I think he would jump at the chance for a takedown of Grover Fur. But that's his thing.
Yep.
I mean, Lars Lee gets is less impressive the more you read him, I think.
Well, after reading this last article in the Weekly Worker, which I think is a Stalinist rag, although I'm not sure.
No, they're technically not.
Okay.
They're like they're Kautsky. And they broke with the Communist Party of Britain, like the old Moscow one a
Yeah.
while back.
Six also kitchen.
So they're technically not Stalinists, and
Yeah.
they do publish a fairly wide range of people. They're just like left Kautskyites. There's a reason why they're like 4 pages in my book, because they're really not that interesting.
Yeah. Wasn't that McNair?
McNair, he's with them.
There it is. It was niggling in the back of my head. Like, isn't someone? Yeah, it's McNair. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That article. It's funny because I kept wanting to write to Budgeon that if he and Zizek and Stavlakis or whoever his name is started the contemporary research into Lenin in 2007 or 8 with their Lenin Reloaded or whatever book, publishing Lee on Lenin being a second internationalist all along is kind of the end of that era. But I didn't write it out because I didn't trust myself. I was in a bridge burning mode or mood. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean, and I don't know. Budgeon is just he's a businessman. He doesn't care about politics.
Exactly.
If he gave a shit about politics, he wouldn't work with Jacobin. He wouldn't publish Zizek.
Seriously. I started reading Kevin Anderson's updated Lenin and Hegel book, and as much as I disagree with him on Engels, I have to say he's one of the few people in the contemporary Marxist scene who actually does take the Lenin Hegel connection seriously. Most other people don't, you know. So as imperfect as he is, he's probably the closest you'll come to someone who will go through the philosophical notebooks and say, there's something here and it's connected to state and revolution, to imperialism, the latest stage. And I mean, like, I found this in volume 3. There's a or volume 33. There's a, I think I posted on it. There's something called uh uh on the significance of militant materialism, where he gives
Yeah.
he sends a letter into under the banner of Marxism, which was a Russian newsletter in the starting in 1922, and he basically calls for like a materialist
Friends of the Hegelian
yeah,
dialectic. It's a
and
good
he's very
essay.
and he's very specific of the Hegelian dialectic, not just on materialist dialect. Like, it's not a general phrase. You know, he carries it all the way out to 1922 that you've got to read Hegel, and is very specific about that. That's something Kevin Anderson leans on as not being a mistake. But of course, Lars Lee and by extension, John Moreau says, yeah, there was no Hegel moment. What are you guys talking about? Like, it's in the freaking letter.
Well, the thing you have to understand about Lars Lee on Hegel, and he admits this in an essay I think he wrote in a collection of texts called Cataclysm 1914, which is worth picking up in general, actually. And he's talking about Lenin after 1914. And he actually says in there directly that he's not competent and equipped to talk about philosophy, yet he spends multiple pages doing so.
Yes.
Now, to quote Mao, no investigation, no right to speak. I'm sorry. You know jack about this. You shouldn't be taken seriously on it. You shouldn't be writing on it. And we shouldn't be listening to you. I don't remember if he says something like that in the long essay he wrote, but he really what Lee is good at is doing textual analysis of things. You know, he can look at what is to be done and all these other Russian texts and Kautsky and can kind of see the common language. And he can do it in the original German and Russian, which is okay. That's really good. But he doesn't,
He
but
leans on it too much,
he
though.
leans on it too much and he just stretches it out for Lenin's whole career. And
Yeah.
then it's surface level, so you really don't see what it means in practice.
He
You know,
plays up.
there's no totality. And
Yeah.
by his method, and I say this in my book, I can point a direct line of continuity between Lenin and the Communist Party of China in today, which is ridiculous. You know, they use some of the same language, but is anyone going to tell me those are the same things, basically?
And yeah, yes, exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
maybe if you're like Haas, you can think that, but the rest of us don't. And he's again, if he was just doing textual analysis and saying Lenin's not a totalitarian, it's like, fine, okay. That's actually useful, even if lots of people have said that before, including Lenin.
And
It's
better.
also like, but the thing is, like, he is, and again, I don't think he's actually like sinister, like a mustache twirling villain or something. He's just an academic, and this happens to be his hobby horse. The problem is, you
Yeah.
take that, you get Jacobin, you get DSA, and you get, you know, we got to line up behind Holocaust Harris and shit. You know, that's Eric Blanc. That's what his role is.
Yep.
Because he takes this that Lee did and he makes it into a program, and it's a shitty program. I spoke about this to Left Voice about a week ago, so
Yeah.
very fresh in my mind.
I sent you that article.
I saw it. I didn't read it though.
Yeah, I looked. I might have missed it.
I did
but
look if I was cited in it, but that's
Yeah,
it.
that's the first thing I looked for was whether you were cited, and I don't think. Yeah, he didn't cite you, but most of the discussion is roughly the same.
It looks useful. I mean, I would like to be cited, but it's like whatever. I mean, the book only came out a few months ago, so it's like I wouldn't be super upset about it. But
Honestly,
no, it's like,
yeah, if this article is out now, it's kind of like your book. Like, eventually, someone put a cap on whatever's written in it. So even if he has heard of your book, it was too late to add it.
yeah, that's fine. It's like largely either just came out or it was whatever. It's about to come out. He has like a history of Bolshevism. And I
Yeah.
think I saw that like when my book was already like deep in the editorial phases, like I couldn't include that. I would actually like to read it and write a review at some point. But
You know what? If you can get them to let you make it a second edition for the paperback, you could probably put an appendix in saying,
I could.
"Here you
I'm
go.
actually
Here you
curious
go,
if it's
man."
out now. Let me just check.
Oh, I think you can get it on LibGen. I think
Yeah,
you
yeah, I
can get
know.
it on
That's where I
LibGen.
am now. Oh,
Yeah.
it might be out. Oh, I guess it's out. So, okay, it came out last year.
Yeah, the hardback.
Yeah. So that's going to be out whenever Haymarket does their thing. So,
Oh, and I almost feel bad. I almost feel bad bringing it up because you're getting into all of these nasty fascists, and
it's
now you're going to have
not
to
as
go.
bad as like Lars Lee sucks, but he's not a Nazi.
Yeah, it's true.
And I like the number, like I've dealt with everyone from lately, like Alfred Baumler, Oswald Spengler, Ernst Jünger, Mussolini, the Phalange, Hitler. It's like really, really sick. And it's really just making me mad at all the Nietzsche apologists because it's like
Yeah.
his fingerprints, if we're talking forensics, his fingerprints are everywhere. Even on a group like the Phalange, which is more well known for being Catholic in their fascism, it's all there. All the inspirations of
Yeah,
that.
I've noticed all of these different
Nietzsche.
communities take on epistemologies of other groups that they're not actually a part of, but they find useful, sort of opportunistically. I don't know. I don't know what the history of that is, but the Catholics and the extreme right wing have sort of fiddled with each other
Well, they do in the
for a
sense
long
because,
time.
like, yeah, Nietzsche's an atheist. Okay. But
Right.
he's also an atheist who really likes religion to discipline people. And part of like the death of God isn't to celebrate like the end of religion. It's to, he doesn't like the fact that there's the mass man and, there's democracy, socialism, and all that kind of stuff. And he wants to promote a new religion. He wants a new order of rank. And so Nietzsche wants to
Absolutely.
radicalize the bourgeoisie and the Übermensch, basically to, like put the heel on people. So, that kind of finds, in a sense, allegiance with property holders, aristocrats who are still around in Europe, and the bourgeoisie and the church, who are all opposed to socialism, democracy, communism, the Jews, of course. So that
Yeah,
even though,
and Trump, I heard Trump is already saying if he loses, it will be the Jews' fault. Like he's come out
yeah,
explicitly
I mean,
saying this.
so yeah, even though Nietzsche's an atheist, it's like he's an atheist who's fine, the Catholic Church and like these hardcore reactionaries can get behind. Because depending on the fascist you talk about, it can be very explicit. Some of them want to combine Nietzsche with Christianity. Some of whom the people they're influenced by are Nietzscheans and everything. It's like that. So that's the Falange is like a few steps removed. Oswald Mosley, who was head of the British Union of Fascists, was a very explicitly Nietzschean and Christian. And Evola is weird because he's Nietzschean but pagan. So you've got all these weird things. And if you read Hitler, it's like there's question about whether he actually read Nietzsche. It's circumstantial, but some of it filtered down to him. The way he talks about the Jews as like carriers of modernity and Bolshevism, as a
Yeah.
slave revolt, that's out of Nietzsche almost directly.
Ebola sounds like a disease.
Yeah, it's like the way I would talk about it was like how I describe Harrington in DSA. Most people in DSA don't talk about Harrington. They don't read him.
But
They
his
don't
ideas are
cite,
out
but it's,
there.
yeah, his ideas are in the air. It's the common sense. You breathe it in. So it's the common sense of DSA is Harringtonism. Now, if you're in National Socialism or fascism, what you're breathing in is Nietzsche, along with other people, of course, but Nietzsche, that's the big fart that people let out and that you're breathing in.
Lovely. Yeah. I I f- y- man, I'll have to forward it to you at some point because I don't think I have it on my board right now. But apparently Matt McManus, who you know is another one of these analytical philosophy guys, actually got into it in a debate on YouTube somewhere with someone named Spencer Leonard.
I know who
And
he is.
and
He's a
Leonard is
platypus
he's a
scumbag.
Platt who is anti-Lacerdo and anti aristocratic rebel. And so who of all people defends aristocratic level rebel, but McManus, one of the analytical philosopher folks. I I find it feels like Zizek getting together with Peterson and talking about the Communist Manifesto. Like why would you take these guys and have them debate? Like they're the worst people to talk about it, but for some reason they're so far.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I
it's
yeah, it's
wow.
I mean, McManus is a liberal, obviously, because he's an analytical Marxist. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a weak sauce. It's like I watched a CNN special last night on the MAGA communists. I'm really pissed that they gave them attention.
God.
But it's like it was so weak sauce because it was like a liberal critique basically against extremism, and it
Yeah.
wasn't really done very well. And it's weak medicine. You can't combat that shit with weak medicine. And I think with Nietzsche, the medicine it has to be you either accept this or you reject it. I don't think that there's if you're talking about a coherent worldview, Nietzsche must be rejected completely.
You should
I'm
write something
certain if he
about
said something that's useful on aesthetics, you can find it said by someone else better who doesn't have Nazi connotations.
future. You might want to write about Ayn Rand and the American right because first of
I referenced some stuff about her in the footnotes, but I'm not talking too much about like Ayn Rand. I do talk a little about von Mises and Mussolini.
Yeah.
But I didn't really, the only economists I talk about were, actually, I don't really talk about economics too much in terms of Nietzsche and Mussolini, as opposed to like businessmen who like the fact that he's like rationalized the economy and stuff. And I was talking about like liberals who like the fact that it's, progressivism reborn and all these pragmatists who really like Mussolini. So I do reference some of that stuff in footnotes, but I have to have some cutoff. I did read Corey Robbins stuff, and I don't like a lot of his politics, but a lot of his research in the reactionary mind and the stuff he did on Nietzsche's Marginal Children, which is his essay from like 10 years ago, is very useful. But I don't talk about it per se in too much detail.
Oh, I forgot to ask. Do you have a buyer yet for your Grover?
No, I'm still waiting.
Okay.
Monthly Review said no, which actually doesn't surprise me because they just published Lacerdo, so they probably didn't want a book where I was calling him a Stalinist and saying he's full of shit.
I mean, he has an entire book refuting the Black Stalin legend. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
it sucks.
how much more blatant do you want to get? I mean,
I know. But anyhow, I expect them. I still have it out at a few places. I'm just waiting to hear from them.
Repeater, maybe?
I don't know if Repeater's actually accepting right now, but I've sent it somewhere else.
Cool. Well, I'm going to be like this the whole time until
I'll let you know. If I hear about it, it should come to my email.
Yeah,
And I check the spam folder, believe me.
absolutely. Okay, so we're at 8:58, and I'm just gonna. Okay, so we hit the notion just really quick. So next is the judgment. How long is the judgment? Oh, it's
Pretty-
long.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking it does evenly divide into 4 pieces, so we could always divide in half.
Gosh. Yeah, let's divide it in half and start from 623 to
I'll find it. 650. 650 is where we go through the first 2 judgments.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So do you want to quarter it maybe?
Hang on. Okay, no. Judgment of necessity is 650.
Right. So that's judgment.
You know what? Let's do chapter 2 from the judgment through the end of A, which is the judgment of
Okay.
What is that?
Judgment of existence or judgment
Existence. Yeah, existence. So the beginning of the chapter, and then starting on 630, just read through the end of the judgment of existence. Yeah, this is a long chapter. You don't want to just take it in one bite. So maybe in 2 or yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it in 2. This won't take that long. But that's the reading for next time. What is it, honey? Do you need medicine?
I'm having a lot of pain. Helps with the pain.
We take a bath. Love you.
I'm gonna say right quick, I actually did briefly talk to Harrison, and he told him about my friend. He's trying to get me to read a particular tour book, and he gave me an exact book that directly addresses Latour's book that he's having me read.
Awesome. Which
Yeah. Like, yeah.
Can you put the title in the chat?
Yeah. Messenger chat.
Yeah, put it in there. I'd like to take a look. Anything that Harrison recommends, I'm like, at least take a skim through.
Yeah, I
Um,
was going to definitely at least get to the intro to the people he's complaining about. This particular artist author's complaining about because it's a series of people, including Latour.
he's a busy bee these days. He's writing two books and doing university teaching. Um,
The Persistence of the Negative by Benjamin Noyes. So
Yeah, Noise is I haven't read too much of him, but Harrison is good friends with him. He's on my Facebook friends list, and
Hmm.
I think yeah, I would probably recommend him. I shouldn't say that before reading the book, but I would say you're in good hands.
you have enough of a hint, double hint there, yeah.
you know what's funny? I'm actually looking in my Facebook and I don't see noise.
Oh wow. So the book's about Deirdre DeLuise, Latour, Antonio Negri, and Badeau. Hmm. Because it relies on affirmation.
You know what? I think he was on my Facebook friends as well, but I think he has dropped off.
Hold on, let me check. Oh, didn't spell his name right. He's still on Facebook. He's friends with me.
Well, then he blocked me for some reason.
Huh. I don't know.
Why? What did I say?
Maybe it's just the period of time that you had multiple people just getting mad at you on your wall. Who knows?
Who knows? Oh well. Yeah, because his book is in Harrison's 50.
Huh. Okay, that works.
I mean, it's whatever. I didn't know him other than from the book. I'm sad. No, it seriously, it's just
I
Facebook.
know him. That's weird.
I'm like one of the few people I know when people start getting angry on Facebook, I always break that out, and say, I'm from the MySpace and before era. And I still tell people, "Oh, it's just Facebook." And people look at me like I'm insane. And I'm like, whatever. If I wanted to talk to the guy, I just find his email address and email him. Uh, and that's fine. I know people today who have never not heard of Instagram or Snapchat. And it always blows my mind just a little bit that not too long ago. Yeah. Yeah. Love you. Yeah. Back when we were on the corded phones and you went out and bought a long uh cord so you could walk around the house talking on the phone before we had the antennas. Or at least we didn't have antennas until very late.
Never still about that long.
Yeah. Persistence of the negative. 2010. Okay. And oh no, he's got a paperback, so that'll work. Um,
Yeah.
does anyone want to talk about anything in particular?
Any particular on the philosophy of nature, is any particular translation that's favored?
I know the main one's always going to be the Oxford.
According to Doug, well, and everybody else I've talked to, the one put out by um Wallace, I think his name is
Yeah.
not a good one.
Yeah, this is
Philosophy of
Miller.
Nature? Is that the second one?
Yeah, that's the second one, Philosophy of Nature.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
The
mean, as far as is there, I mean, the only one I've ever found is like the Miller translation. Is there like a different one?
Oh, Jim was talking about Nietzsche. I think
Oh,
I think
Nietzsche?
Kyle thought,
yeah, I
yeah,
misheard you entirely. Jeez.
yeah, he was talking about Nietzsche and the best translation, Doug.
The translation, like, you would probably, if you really want to read Nietzsche, probably the Cambridge University editions. If you want
Ooh,
like
accurate.
more accurate, the thing with Kaufman is he's more literal and it's actually like as enjoyable as Nietzsche can be to read. And there are a few places where I think Kaufman actually has like a better translation, but it's mostly on specific passages. But the thing the Cambridge edition does is they don't like water down a lot of his language, which Kaufman does. It's also, if you really are interested, is worth actually going back to like some of his very first English translators, like Oscar Levy, Anthony
Yeah.
Ludovici. What's the name? Something Kennedy. I forget his name, but some of them are really interesting just because like they're all proto-fascists, so they have a tendency to, well, they don't tone them down.
Yep. They're honest.
And it's also I don't know if he translated it, but H.L. Mencken wrote an introduction to the Antichrist, where he basically calls for
Really?
pogroms against the Jews. He did one of the first
Oh
major
shit.
English English language study of Nietzsche, which is worth checking out, called The Philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. I forget if he translated any specific text off the top of my head now.
Yeah, he's one of the first popularizers of
Yes, he did.
Nietzsche in this country.
And he liked Mussolini, just like everyone else.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
But
remember.
then Emma Goldman was one of the first popularizers too. You know what?
Yeah, she didn't like Lenin, but she liked Mr. Proto-Fascist. Okay, yes, he did do the translation for the Antichrist, and he wrote the introduction. There are actually two introductions to that text. The first, an early edition from 1918 or 23, whenever it is, he calls for pogroms, says the Jews should be slaughtered for what they've done. Then he changes that to they should be persecuted, which is it's still bad, but it's like I wonder if he did that because that edition came out in 1933 when Hitler came into power.
Lovely.
Yeah, Mencken, yeah, he was sympathetic to Hitler in the early years, I think.
Yeah.
Then he became critical. Well, later on, I think, like after Kristallnacht, all after that stuff, Mencken becomes more critical of the Nazis.
Yeah, and there's also the fact like when the US was at war, he was
Yeah,
critical. There was still, if you read some of his letters, he kind of hedges and haws about it.
yeah.
I do have a little section on Mencken, and he actually, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, there's these people are like really horrible.
Yeah, because she also did George Bernard Shaw.
I did Shaw, I did Yeats.
Well, Shaw was able to say he was an admirer of Lenin,
Yeah, because
admirer of
he's an idiot.
Mussolini, and Hitler all at the same time.
You know, it's a lot of people. You know, you have like I did Chesterton, uh, Lovecraft.
Do Lincoln Steffens.
I actually, yes, I did link it. I didn't do a separate section, but he's under like the progressive pragmatist section.
Mm.
So I do talk about his interview with Mussolini and stuff
Yeah,
there.
and he had he was a real Nietzsche, a real Mussolini admirer.
Yeah, and he's the one who had that famous expression about the Soviet Russia, like I've
Yeah.
seen the future and it works. Because there was that, like the progressives were not progressive and they really weren't super coherent. But it's also like I think it's the same with progressives and pragmatists. They're drinking from the same elitist well as the fascists, which
Yeah.
kind of, there's really no reason for them to not be fascists or sympathize with it. Like Gentili, said like I am a fascist because I'm a liberal. And in a certain sense, I don't think he was wrong. That's not to say every Italian liberal became a fascist. Clearly they didn't.
But a lot
One
of
of his friends didn't
a lot of
name.
them, a lot of Italian liberals did support Mussolini in the early
Yes,
years.
like
Grouchy
Croce
did.
did, and he was actually friends with Gentili. Like they had a long working relationship. And it says something that a lot of that they sympathize with Mussolini until he went too far, just like a lot of the Germans did, oh, we didn't like Hitler until he went too far. It's like the fact that you even supported these people is enough to you deserve a blindfold and a cigarette. And I'm not going to give you the blindfold and the cigarette too.
Yeah, well,
It's too good for them.
Mussolini's first finance minister was a liberal. He was in fact, I think he was the leader of the Liberal Party.
Mm.
Then Mussolini appointed him to be the finance minister.
Yeah, he had in his early coalition governments, there were people who were not in the fascist party.
Yeah. Although
Gentili, I think, when he was initially appointed, was not in the fascist party. He does join it, and I forget. I wrote it down. I write this down so I don't have to remember it. But he does eventually join, and he stays for the rest of his life. But
Yeah. Well, if I recall, Ishe Landa showed the sort of porous back and forth of the liberals
yep,
with
I cite
fascists.
very heavily from his books, on fascism, liberalism, and a few others. They're very good books,
Not to
regardless of
mention
where his politics happen to be right now.
not to mention Lacerda, who
Oh, well,
sort of wrote
Lacerda
the
like
book.
frames the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah.
The opening section, like originally was supposed to be like a long piece on like all these Marxist readings of Nietzsche.
Yeah.
That would be 100 pages. So I'm like, I'm not going to do this. So I just whittled it down to the essentials, which is Lukács and Lacerda.
Mm. Nice. Has Harrison been following your
He's read parts
drafts?
of stuff. It's what I've written right now is still very messy. Like I have to clean it up. I have to fix all the citations. And I'm
Yeah.
not going to do any of that until I've actually have all the sections done,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
would
Don't
hope will be
refine anything until you're
sometime
done.
in the middle of next month, but I don't know. I have
Yeah.
no idea how long Evola is going to be right now. I'm hoping I'm at least a fifth of the way done.
Are
Because
you
I
aiming
talked,
for 300-400 pages?
it's going to
Less?
be at least 300 pages. It's going to be longer than the Stalinism book.
I had a feeling as many sections as you've already written for. This is going to be
It really is the dialectics of Uranus. All these people are connected.
please give it that title. I love it.
I want to. Ecce Duce makes more sense, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably will jokingly. I might write an essay called Dialectics of Uranus.
Yeah. Nothing wrong
But
with that.
the book itself is gonna be Ecce Duce, because if you know Nietzsche, one of his books is called Ecce Homo, Behold the Man.
Mhm. Yeah.
This is, Behold the Leader, and the subtitle is it's like what on Nietzsche, Mussolini, and fascism, and the philosophy of fascism.
Yeah.
Originally it was going to be Italian fascism, but then I realized, well, I'm talking about like a half dozen countries, so let's just say fascism.
Are you going to do a Franco section?
I did the Falange. Franco is really not an intellectual. And I think doing the Phalange made more sense because I talked about their two main founders,
Yeah,
or at least Jose Antonio Primo de Rivera, who's the
yeah.
more intellectual of them.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, people talk about Kerensky and whoever that other guy was. I can't remember the Russian dude. But they both eventually backed Denikin and the other guy, and no one writes about Denikin and the who's the other
No, because they're
general?
not. I mean, this is also an intellectual history. Franco really isn't worth the time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do Salazar either.
Who?
Hitler was put in there. Some people are actually put in there deliberately just so I can talk about other people. So it's like I
Yeah.
put in the conservative revolution because I'm like, well, I actually want to talk about Ebola. So I actually going to talk about these people.
Right.
The big
And
omission, of course, is Heidegger. He's talked about, but he doesn't have a section. The same with the other one. It's kind of actually he's not an omission, but I don't have a separate section on Alfred Rosenberg.
you know, I
Al
almost
Schmidt.
I
I
almost
don't have
wonder,
I talk about Schmidt, but I don't have like a section devoted to him.
you know, I almost wonder if you shouldn't ask Harrison to contribute the chapter on Heidegger since he'll be more up to speed
I've
than you
spoke
are.
to Harrison and I'm hoping he'll write the forward to it.
Okay. But you know what I mean? Like Anti-Düring
Heidegger
had
is important, but the
had
thing
the
is, like,
entire
it's also
economic section written by Marx, and I thought, you know,
I'm fine not having a Heidegger section, just like I'm fine not having at this point Marxist readings of Nietzsche.
right.
It's it would be its own thing, and
Yeah.
Heidegger is important. He's worth talking about. Again, he is going to be talked about,
Yeah,
but you're not going to find a section Heidegger.
right.
There also, like I said, there's not going to be sections on Schmidt, although he's talked about. Rosenberg is talked about, but he doesn't have a section. I'm also like, it is an intellectual history, and again, it's like it's big enough as it is.
Really?
Like,
No section on Rosenberg. Okay.
no, I'm talking about him in relation to like other people.
Right.
So I do talk about him on Alfred Baumler, who was the major Nazi Nietzsche expert, and on Evola.
Makes sense. Well, like
But
you said, it's an
yeah,
intellectual
yeah, it's also like
biography.
it's the same thing with Saturn. Like when you write, you have to have a cutoff point. Otherwise, could do this for the rest of your life. And I do not want to write an intellectual history of fascism for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So it's like with Saturn, like I can tell you like four or five people if I could do it again, I would probably put them in like Mao, Che, Fanon, Albert Camus, Bettelheim, a few others. But eventually you got to cut it off. And I
Did
got to cut it off here.
I gotta ask, did you finish reading Destruction of Reason?
I read that years ago.
Okay, you did. So you're keeping that in the background with Lukash's
I have it
stuff.
cited through,
You're
first
good.
of all, it's cited in the beginning to
Great.
frame the whole discussion.
Yeah.
And I
Perfect.
have passages where I cite throughout the text.
Perfect. Yeah. This is gonna be awesome then. Oh
I don't
man.
know. I think assuming I get it published, I think most people will ignore it. Like they ignore everything I write. So
Well, I hope not. I'll just say that.
I feel compelled to write it, just like I feel compelled to write everything. But yeah,
Cool.
Meanwhile, Meta AI will continue to call you a philosopher.
I'm not a philosopher. I'm a historian.
According to Meta AI, you're not only a philosopher, you got your doctorate from in philosophy from UMass Boston.
That's funny. I never went there.
It's
I don't know where.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, and you're in Key Wiki, apparently.
I know I'm in Key. Everyone's
Yeah.
in Key Wiki.
Yeah.
I'm not. But then again, I haven't done very much like publicly, so it's not like I haven't been published, but I was only published in like ISR and like maybe one other place. I guess that's my goal. Get famous enough to get in Key Wiki. I joke, but yeah,
Witch hunters need something to hunt.
yeah. All right, kids. Yeah, it's almost 9:30, and I gotta finish bathing my kid. So we'll get together next week and talk about the first part of the judgment, and just sort of um yeah, yeah, just sort of think about uh I don't know, some quotes that are interesting from it. We'll take it from there.
Thanks, comrades.
Good to go, comrades. Have a great one.